Hello, everybody, and welcome to Planet FPL, the world where everything revolves around Fantasy Premier League. My name's Clayton.
And my name is James. How are you, Clates?
I'm good. I'm good. We're both on the mend, it sounds and feels like. So, yeah, it's Tuesday, and today it doesn't revolve around Fantasy Premier League. It's the international break, so it's a people's poll. And I can't remember the last time we've done a people's poll, but when I was looking at this one, at one point yesterday, I think someone actually replied. The results were literally split 33.3% on
All
each.
three,
And
yeah.
yeah, so quite a popular one, it seems. And what was the winner?
Yeah, it was one. I think sometimes you get two that are really close. It's like, I'm not sure. I looked at the voting like 3 hours in and I was like, I have no idea which way this is going to go on the voting. So we gave the Twitter community three options, and this is a fan related topic. So the winning vote in the end had 36% of the vote. We asked for boardroom involvement. How much should fan opinion matter in boardroom involvement? How much say should fan groups have with decision making at their football clubs? Another one was something that I spoke to you previously about, kind of really wanting to do, and maybe even cover it a little bit on Clayton and James show, perhaps this week on Thursday, about should winning be the priority for football fans? Forget style and substance and community and all the things that football clubs may matter to people for different reasons. Should it ultimately be just defined by you won or you lost? But the winning one is something we have covered on Clayton and James in a smaller scale, but want to expand on it. Is why it feels like everybody feels like football atmospheres at the moment, in this country at least, are a bit shite. So we are covering why does it feel like most football fans are unhappy with match day atmospheres? Now, I said to Clates before we started, kind of want to retitle that 10 reasons why football atmospheres feel a bit shit at the moment. More of a PC title, obviously. And Clates doesn't know what 10 things I've listed. So I'm going to kind of just give subtitles, and we're going to run through some of the reasons. And there may be other reasons that people think. If you think there's something that we miss on this podcast, by all means, shove it in a reply or put it in the comments on YouTube. There's one very obvious place to start here, Clates, and it's cost. The cost of football is unquestionably on the rise. We are seeing week after week the same banner being posed with outside and inside football stadiums that's done by the FSA, the Football Supporters Association. Hashtag stop exploiting loyalty. We've seen lots of complaints this year about many clubs wanting to cancel concession pricing. Any case, put it all together. The cost of football, no doubt, is on the rise, very much pricing out the everyday fan, if you will, for want of a better term. How do we feel about the cost of football?
Um, I mean, yeah, I don't really have much insight to add on that, to be honest. It's very unsustainable for the everyday person, like you said, to be able to go, isn't it? And I think if you go back to the roots of football, it was a I'm going to use the phrase working class, like, but
I
back in the
think you
day,
can
right?
even say working man. So I think you can even say for back in the day.
Okay, yeah, and like that's where the roots of football feel like it came from. And I don't know, you look at it now, and yeah, the everyday person can't afford to go all the time. And I know some people that sit around me at Arsenal, like they're having real conversations about, I'm not sure I can afford to renew my season ticket. They've been going, well, since before I was born, to be honest. So yeah, the cost is ridiculous. But then from the perspective of a fan, there is a flip side perspective where these are businesses and there is enough demand to, I'm not going to say justify the prices they put out, but it's like what do you and I always say? If you and I don't go, there'll be someone else that takes the seat, right? So
It will be at
demand,
our clubs. Yeah.
yeah. So the cost is a tricky one, but only from the perspective of people like you and I and air quotes normal working people. I think yeah, there's definitely a flip side perspective from the corporate and the executives where they don't think about us, like, and I think I've kind of made peace with that, sadly, a long time ago. And as long as I can afford to go, I'll go. If it gets to a point where I can't, then I can't. And unfortunately, I don't think there's much I can personally do about that, but it's a bit shit, yeah.
Cost of football is a knock-on conversation that we've had plenty on Patreon, and I'm sure we'll revisit again in the future. The cost of football, I believe, directly impacts the atmosphere because the people who want to make the most atmosphere are the ones who are really struggling to go, which is your young adults, essentially. It's very difficult for people in their 20s, etc. I think to afford to go on a regular basis. So the cost is really important here. There's plenty of times I didn't used to go away from home as much as I used to, and one of the big reasons for that was couldn't afford to. I couldn't justify taking time off work as kind of a sub impact of cost, if you will. I need to go to work to pay for other things rather than go away. I'm in a more privileged position where I can afford to do it now. And you will have heard, you certainly will have heard me say in the past, I don't moan about the cost because I'll go. And
Yeah,
that's where Tottenham, for those who don't know, is Tottenham and Arsenal. So we do have a bias here in terms of supporting London clubs and also two of the biggest clubs in the country. But Tottenham can charge what they want, and I'm going reality. So, example would be Europa League quarter final, big European competition, but not the Premier competition. My ticket's going to cost me £66. Now, by the way, for comparison, that is the same cost of ticket price as it would be for if we play Southampton, Leicester, Ipswich. It's the same price, right? Now, lots of people at Tottenham moaning about Tottenham have put these prices in place. They absolutely could have gone higher. And ultimately, the ground is always full when we play it at Southampton, at Leicester, or an Ipswich, and it's European quarter final. If Frankfurt is not full, it will be very, very close to it. And I suspect it probably will be full because it's European quarter final, and that's our season, right?
yeah,
So if if the ground is full, club don't give a shit who those people are in terms of the bums on seats. But there's an impact to the atmosphere because I think £66, and that's kind of average. There'll be some tickets in the ground that are less, nearer 50. There'll be some that are more and sort of 80 going towards 100. But in any case, just Thursday night, 8 o'clock kickoff, the people that you want in the ground to create the best atmosphere, many of them are going to go, I'm going to watch that on the telly, or I'm going to watch
yeah.
that in the pub.
We had similar at Arsenal. I think I mentioned this maybe on the Clayton and James show with the PSV game, right?
Mm.
I think a lot of that happened because Arsenal won so heavily in the first leg. That caused the second leg to be a dead rubber. But anyway, they priced that as a category A. It was, I think, £94 face value my ticket was, and I didn't go. A lot of people I know didn't go. Just in my head, I couldn't justify £94 for what that game was and my personal circumstances essentially. But yeah, everyone that you want to be in the ground to create the atmosphere then wasn't there. And the one thing I was surprised at, and it goes back to what you just said about the ground will be full. Like I wouldn't say the ground was 100% capacity, but it was more than I thought it would be because on the day I saw like the screenshots of the ticket exchange, there were thousands going. And there were a lot more people in the. Like, it was close to 60,000, which really surprised me. So that was like, okay, that literally proves the point. There will always be people that go regardless.
Which leads into kind of the next point about tourism. Because I suspect many of those tickets on that night with Arsenal were picked up by people in London gone, oh my God, I can go to a Champions League game at the Emirates. We had a big conversation about type of people going, and I think you and I are very much in agreement that it doesn't matter where you're from, you can get a ticket and you want to go and support the team. It's fine. There is certainly a proportion of people that believe that it's not helping with the atmosphere. Perhaps they're not culturally aligned because they're not from certain place. I think you and I are very much influenced by the fact that we live in a very multicultural city and are used to this. We used to be in the away ends and seeing people who go, okay, they're definitely not British, but they support Tottenham or Arsenal, for example. But so many of these stadiums in the country now become like to-do list, bucket list places. You think of people, places like Anfield, Old Trafford. These are bucket list places to go and see a Premier League game, for example. I think in London, I've said this several times over. I use the example of Brentford. So Brentford very recently built a 17,000 seater stadium, and I think they probably regret it because they're now established as a Premier League club, which when they built it, they weren't a Premier League club. And at some point, if they sustain for another 10 years, they're going to have to look at it because they could comfortably put double that in the ground every week. And not with Brentford fans, by the way, necessarily, with tourists.
Yeah, I think there's an important distinction between tourists and international supporters. So
Yeah.
like, well, when I go abroad, I always try and find a game to watch, like no matter where I am. So that's me as a tourist. When I go, yeah, like if Arsenal were playing in America, for example, and I'm going to be out in the States this summer, aren't I? Like that will be me as an international supporter. So like I don't have a problem with tourists or international fans, but I think definitely not international fans. But I do think tourism is a factor in why atmospheres are worse, and it's not from the like there's anything wrong with it, because like I just said, if I go to Madrid next week and in 2 weeks, 3 weeks time, whenever it is, and Atletico are playing at home, I'm going to be a foreigner in that country that wants to watch them. Why I think it is a factor is I don't know their songs, I don't know their culture, I can't make noise if I want to. I don't speak the language. So I think if there is a tourist sat next to me at Arsenal, they're not going to be able to get involved unless they've done some research or something, because they don't know what we sing about and stuff. So I think again, it's not a problem, but it's definitely a factor. Whereas like an international supporter, let's just say an Arsenal fan from where I'm from, Goa, India, comes over from Goa, they'll get involved. And even if they don't, like that's fine. Not everyone goes to football to sing, but I think the tourism is definitely a factor in my opinion, just by culture of not knowing what to kind of output out of your mouth.
Yeah, no, I get that. I think the example you said with Atletico as an example is really good. You probably, if you went, you're probably not going in with the ultras and singing the Spanish songs. So you wouldn't have a clue what is going on. You might be looking around, going, "Hey, this is amazing," but you actually probably are not contributing. I think there's a lot of that. And I referenced on Clayton and James a couple of weeks ago. I've seen Koreans, and obviously there's quite a bit of Korean following for Tottenham, obviously because of Sonny. I've seen a couple in the way in, and they're joining right in. You think, great. But I also see every week at Tottenham lots of Koreans there who are not joining in with the songs. It can go both ways. I think it's a consequence in terms of the tourists as well. Just think back to the Atletico example you gave. If you could get hold of a ticket and it was expensive, probably think, well, I'm here anyway. I've come all this way. Yeah, I'll pay the extra because I am a tourist and it's a bucket list thing. I've been to the Wonder Metropolitano. So that goes the other way here. So there's an implication towards the cost as well, because I think, again, particularly with the London clubs, they know they're putting bums on seats, and
Yeah,
that's
and I remember.
that's ultimately what they care about.
Yeah, I remember there's two times I've been abroad and I've got a ticket. One was in Romania. I can't remember who I went to. I think it may have been FCSB actually, that we went to watch. But same thing, right? I was an English tourist there. Their atmosphere was insane, but I'm sure this will be a factor later on in one of your 10, but like they don't sing, they just kind of bounce and make noise. So I could get involved with that. When I was in Italy, I went to watch Verona against Sampdoria, I think, with one of my mates, and we accidentally was sat with the ultras. And I mean, what an experience! But again, it was just like bouncing, making noise, so we could get involved with that. I feel like in England, a lot of air quotes atmosphere is like lyric based chants. So
Yeah.
it makes it hard to kind of get involved. Whereas across the continent, from my experience, it just feels like I don't even think they're there to watch the game half the time. They just make a constant noise for 90
No,
minutes.
I've been at games away from home and they're doing the flags the whole game, and I think you can't be watching the game. You've got this giant flag in front of you the whole game and just making constant noise. It does. We've said it before, and Clayton and I both experienced watching our teams away from home in Europe. The majority of places you go in Europe would embarrass like every ground in this country basically in terms of atmosphere. Some are much better than others, not calling anyone specifically shit, but atmospheres in Europe are much more, I guess you could say, choreographed. And I think
Yeah,
culturally our fans don't want that. So like say Tottenham do the odd tifo and stuff, you hear people moan about it. It's like, no, I don't want that, don't want
really.
that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
About a
Whereas it's like
tifo.
culturally in Europe, it's like such a big thing to do things like that.
I think the interesting case study for me was the Ashburton Army at Arsenal. So like the tifo point I find interesting actually, because I think most people I see in England appreciate tifos when they see them across the continent and
Definitely.
stuff.
It looks
But
great if they're
yeah,
done
I think
well,
they're
by the
amazing.
way. Some look
Yeah,
bad.
but yeah, but the Ashburton Army, like I think for people that don't know them, they were a young group at Arsenal that I think they've been around for years, but I think they only started to get noticed that year. Arsenal challenged for the league the first time, 22-23 season, and they're a young group of fans, and they all sit in one area behind the goal, and like they culturally, I think they tried to inject something a little bit different. I know Palace have their group that do it, but like within the kind of, I know people don't like the term, but within the big six, I think they were the first group to try something like that, and they got shat on so much. And like, there's clips out of context that, yeah, it looks a bit cringe and it does look a bit tin pot, but I think you got to start somewhere. And like, I could see they were a bit more culturally aligned with what happens across the continent, where like they were
Yeah.
just looking to bounce and make noise. Like they weren't necessarily watching the game; they were trying to wave flags and stuff. But like the reaction to them, I mean, I was so surprised because I was just like, they're young. They're a young group of kids, not kids, sorry. They're young adults trying to make a difference, and they almost just got shat on. And like I say, I know out of context it looked a bit silly sometimes, but like you got to start somewhere. And they were, in my opinion, a big factor behind the resurgence of atmosphere at the Emirates in that season. And yeah, I just found the reaction to them quite interesting because it's like everyone shits and moans on the atmosphere in England, and then when you've got a young group trying to sort and do something about it, they just get squashed. And yeah, I don't know, found that one an interesting one.
Go back to kind of the cost point with them. Like they are majority male. I think it's fair to
Yeah,
say the majority. And they are younger crowd. They'll have teenagers in that crowd and people in
yeah,
their
they're like
20s.
16 to 21. Yeah,
You've not got Bob who's been going, he was on the North Bank at Ivory in the 80s and he's not part of that group, right? So
yeah,
they need to be able to afford to go. I've spoke about them in the past and saying there are connotations about that group that I don't like. Naturally, I'm not going
yeah,
to like them because I support the enemy, but there are connotations in terms of their choice of color of clothes that they like that I don't like because it brings a
yeah, and
connotation
I
that's not
understand
great.
that.
In terms of their efforts to try and raise the atmosphere in a football stadium that is always criticized for its library atmosphere, good on them. Good on them. Don't have a problem with that. And actually, I think this is a rare case with Arsenal where that's been allowed to happen because most clubs don't want that. We had Tottenham tried to publicise this singing section idea for a couple of games we had, where season ticket holders perhaps aren't in the same spots, and you say, right, you're buying in this block a singing section ticket, right, with the idea of being singing. So I had one block that was singing, then another that was normal, and then another one was singing again. It's like you're pissing this up the wall before you've even started, right?
Yeah.
And obviously there'll be still people like, well, I always sit here in this seat. And I don't want this here, right? So to
Did
move it
you
on
sign
to
up to the singing section?
no. I sat in my normal seat, mate. 'Cause you know me, I like my view. But I sit quite close to the home end, despite being at a raised level, where I can feel the atmosphere when it is good, which is not as often as it should be. But one of the other reasons I listed was families. And please don't paint that the wrong way as in we don't want families at football, not at all. But I'll give you an example. You're talking about the Ashburton Army. Well, imagine it differently where you bought on, is it called the clock end at Emirates? It's where the
Yep.
clock is still called that, where they're behind the goal and you get hold of a ticket for you and your kid who's 8 or something like that. First ever game and you're in row 20 behind them. Right. So this is the sort of thing that's going to give that a negative atmosphere, right? And in terms of people pushing back, because if that person doesn't know that the Ashburton Army is towards the front of that, you got to know that whole block is standing. So your
Yeah,
kid
and I
is
think
not sitting on the seat anymore; it's now standing on the seat because it's the only way they can see. And there might be certain words, lyrics used in some of these chants. You think that's not appropriate for my kid and stuff like that as well, right?
yeah, and
So
that
there's a
was definitely a
pushback.
cock. Yeah, and that was definitely a cock up from Arsenal. They kind of put the Ashburton Army, like you said, Arsenal actually worked. I don't know what the situation is right now, to be honest, in terms of the relationship between them and the club. But when they first came onto the scene, Arsenal worked with them directly, but they put them in the family enclosure, and that, in my head, makes no sense. Like, why would you put the group of people that want to sing, want to not sit down and be like stood in front of people that are potentially, I don't know, 6 to 10 years old? So that I think was the logistical mistake, which I think can be rectified and worked on. But yeah, I think that was a bit of a cock up from the off, to be honest. But yeah, you're right. If you've got families that go, they there are certain areas in a stadium which I think are better for families and stuff. And I think it's just a logistical thing in terms of where you plan that, and because Arsenal does have a family enclosure, so I think it's a case of getting better with seat planning and everything. To be honest.
Trust me, let me promise you that football is much better with families going than not. Even down to, you'll have heard me say this about my dad going to places he hasn't been for 30 years. And he's like, oh, it's all right here now. It used to be dangerous. Yeah, it's because the profile of people that go, right? It's good that there is so much more children that can feel safe to go to football with their parents. It's good that so many more women feel that it's safe to go to football in something that was so, back in the 80s, I guess 98% plus of the crowd was probably just white male in this
Yeah.
country, right? So that comes back to diversification of fans. We definitely want more women to be able to go. Trust me, there's loads of women I see travel up and down this country supporting Tottenham away from home. And some of them are some of the nuttiest fans that we've got, mate. And they'll make the most noise. But generally speaking, a cultural of families going is not going to get involved in your atmosphere in quite the same way. And I think you're right. Families are better off in certain areas of the stadiums than others. But person who wants to take their child for the first time doesn't necessarily know that he's sitting behind the Ashburton Army. He's thinking, well, I can sit behind a goal. It's good. And actually, best atmospheres you'll probably see in Europe, where are the ultras most commonly? Well, behind a goal, right?
Yeah, exactly. But this is where I think it's probably there's we're talking specifically about atmospheres, right? But there's different ways to support a club, and I think within the Emirates, there's 60,000 people there that support in different ways. There's a guy behind me. He's so old, but once upon in his life, he was sat on the North Bank terrace, stood on the North Bank terraces, giving it. He's at a stage in his life where he still has a right to support the club, even if he can't verbally give it, and that's fine. Like I think there's this thing of like there's this danger of being tunnel vision, and like there's only one way to be in a football stadium, and I think for families, like especially children, they're the next generation, right? Like I remember my first game was probably what hooked me. I remember it. It was Sunderland at home. I would have been 7 years old. Like it was that kind of feeling around the ground that I was hooked. Once I had that, I was like, Dad, when are we going next? When are we going next? Like you want that for the kids. So I think atmosphere is an interesting one because it's like, yeah, it's definitely, in my opinion, as well on the decline, but you shouldn't cater for just one viewpoint in terms of like this is how it should be. Yeah.
Absolutely. And in terms of families, it is also relatable to exactly what you just said, the next generation. Most families can't afford, most people can't afford to take their kids. You've got many stadiums, including Tottenham now, where quite often you take your kids, you've got to pay full adult price.
Is it?
Yeah,
Flipping now.
yeah, majority of the stadium, yeah, absolutely. So cup games and stuff different, but in the league, cost you. So your next generation of fans that have learned all the historical songs, etc., like probably you and I did, where we were taken as kids, it's happening far less and less. So families, not just yes, it's more welcoming for families, but also I don't think the next generation of families are going to be your next kind of, I don't want to say ultras because it's not that way here, but your next group of kind of loud singing supporters being priced out of going.
Yeah.
Come back onto that one. Next one I want to raise is schedules and routines, which might be something subconsciously we don't think about too much. When I say about schedules and routines, back in the day it was, well, I'm gonna be in the pub with the guys at 1 o'clock and we're playing at 3 o'clock and I'm having 4 beers before the game. People had more routines. Now, week to week, you'd be 12:30 Saturday. Next week you might be 4:30 Sunday. The week after you might be 8 o'clock on a Friday. People's schedules and routines, I think, have changed. So I think that's a little bit of a factor. And how often do we say with games like the 12:30 is an obvious one on a Saturday? The atmosphere is flat on like the 12:30 on the Saturday. Such says it all the time. It's like 5:30 on a Saturday is much better. Reality, football's relationship with alcohol, like it or not. People have a few drinks, feel a little bit braver in terms of trying to start songs or getting involved in songs. 12:30 on a Saturday, after crowd's been pissed on the Friday night, hungover.
How much of that is related to general cost of living as well, though? Because like, I know in the pub I go to at Arsenal, even since COVID, to be honest, I've seen the price of a pint has gone from like £4 to I think it's 8 now for a pint of Guinness, and it's like I
Wait,
don't know.
where,
You go
where,
like
where are you going? This is in the Emirates.
no, it's called the Gunners Pub. It's on yeah, it's near Old Highbury,
You
and
bloody yuppies, where you are.
what does that mean?
Posh.
Oh right. Well, I mean, it's not posh. It's literally it's one of the
Everybody up
oldest
north just went
traditions.
£8 for a pint of
I
Guinness,
know, but
Clayton.
like that's not because it's a posh place. It's like traditionally where everyone used to drink before Highbury and stuff. You get to see Highbury on the walk to the Emirates and stuff. So it's got sentimental value, but the price is a joke. And I think that probably feeds into it. Like I definitely don't drink as much as I used to, and I think part of it is just health conscious, but part of it is definitely money. Like, and what you said there about the old school routine was like, oh, I meet up with the boys 1 o'clock, you'd all have few drinks. Like the cost of a pint back then was probably 3-4 quid, whereas like around now is a lot more. So I definitely feel it in my circle of
So
friends.
I
Like we
think a
all
lot a
drink a
lot
lot
more
less.
skip that as well now, don't they? Just go to the game.
Yeah, I think so. So I wonder how much of it, like, you're right, the schedule routine is a factor, but I also think with the alcohol, which correlates with atmosphere, like you say, I think, like, I know you're saying it's posh with Arsenal. I think that's a general London pricing, to be
Yeah.
honest, with pints. Like, yeah,
Yeah, it's cheaper than that in the ground at Tottenham. Daniel knows what he's doing. Here's an interesting one. Us.
what do you mean?
Are we the problem? I don't mean me and you specifically. I mean all of us who think, yeah, I want to make the atmosphere better because what do we all have in common? We're all getting older. Doesn't matter how old you are, you're listening to this or watching this, you're getting older. We all are. And I, as someone now in my 40s, don't feel the need to go as batshit crazy in a football stadium as I did when I was 20. It's the
You
truth.
don't, but there are things out of your control that will make you go batshit in a football
Oh,
game.
yeah. Lucas Moura, Amsterdam,
Yeah,
example. Yeah, I get it. But in terms of, I don't, when I'm away from home, I feel like I want to sing all through the game. I don't at home. And a lot of
okay.
the criticism is about home. I'll give an example. I'm going to pick them out. Fulham. Nothing against Fulham, nice football club. They kind of fall into the category of, I mean, the expense of the tickets on their new Riverside stand, half of
How
that's
much are we
probably not
talking?
even Fulham fans. This is astronomical.
Right.
But I've used this before as a reference with, say, Fulham, and you can use this other clubs. Fulham fans go away from home, probably never had a good atmosphere anywhere.
They, but yeah, the photos of them with their charcuterie boards on the trains always crack me up.
Interesting. Good luck to them. But what I mean by that is no one hates Fulham.
No,
So in terms of, it doesn't matter if you're Anfield, Old Trafford, Etihad, Emirates, White Hart Lane, wherever, right? It's not going to be the best atmosphere of the season when you play Fulham. Even like with Chelsea, you have a little bit of a local, but it's not Chelsea's game, right? They don't even really hate Fulham. They're just there, unfortunately. So Fulham fans would be like, atmosphere is shit everywhere. Also, by the way, you go to Fulham and it's probably the quietest ground in the league, by the way. It is the least hostile place, though very difficult to win a game of football there, as you and I can both testify. But I think there's that impact. So some fans just think, hey, shit, everywhere. Well, and it is. But then go to Anfield when they're playing Manchester United and you probably feel very, very different. But also, is it us? So what I mean by that is it would be interesting to speak to, say, the Ashburton Army. And do they think that atmospheres are worse? They probably do. I guess that's part why they're doing what they're doing. But maybe at their age and the way they are in the ground, they probably think they're creating a great atmosphere and it's great. Can't hear that 58,000 other people are largely quiet, for example.
no, excuse me. No, I definitely think they will think it's worse as well because you see them when they're trying to get things going. They kind of turn around at people and try and get them up and stuff. But yeah, in terms of the, is it us? Possibly, yeah. I think, but this is where it's a cultural thing, in my opinion, because across the continent, I think in England we're almost selective with when we use our energy to be verbal and vocal. Whereas across the continent, I think they just make a noise, they bounce, regardless if they're playing Real Madrid or Osasuna. Like they're just they're there, and I think that there's something that I can't quantify there, where it just feels different. Where like even yeah, I'm probably the same at some home games. I'm probably less up for it than I am like against Real Madrid next
It's
Tuesday. I'm gonna
normal.
but like that's
It's
what I think is a cultural thing. Like I don't think people like that in Europe are the same. I don't know.
No, I
People from
agree with
Europe.
you. But if you take my week coming up once football restarts, I'm going to Chelsea on the Thursday night. It's a bit of a rivalry. It's not an important game for us, but it's like, yeah, go and have a sing song. Southampton at home on the Sunday. Then I've got Frankfurt on the Thursday. Right. Am I putting in the same effort for Southampton at home as I am for them other two games? The answer is no. But it's also
No,
the, do I need to? Because Chelsea's a tough game. We always get beat there. We probably get beat there again. So I feel like, well, the team needs me. Frankfurt, it's obviously really important. The team needs me. Southampton in Southampton, isn't it?
all all I'm hearing is smart game management from you. That's all I'm hearing.
Smart game
Keep saying
management. Yeah.
Yeah,
Please don't compare
conserve
me
the
to
energy.
Arteta. I'm not having it. So are we part of the problem? There's something else I'm going to raise in a little bit, which I think comes back and links to that. But here's an interesting one. Some of you might not have thought of. COVID. How much has an impact on COVID had on us in terms of, I think, twofold. One, the break where for so long we couldn't go and be around our friends. And I think for a lot of people, it made them take stock of their lives and what they're doing and choices. And actually, I can live without going to football. I think that had an impact for several people. And you get used to the TV game, if you will. But also our social consciousness, I think, of other people improved a lot, just generically through COVID and our awareness of other people. How much of an impact do you think COVID has had? Because I think there is an element to it that I think for the first year back, it felt like it was like desperate to go back and create noise. And then it kind of dissipated, almost like everyone went to a cup final to start with. And then it went back to what it is now.
How much of that do you think, though? So you said that, yeah, going back, everyone was full on. It was like cup final vibes, and then it dissipated. How much of that do you think is just the football schedule being quite a lot and year on year increase versus thinking it's COVID as a factor?
Maybe, but then you and I are also relating that to playing Wednesday, Saturday, or Thursday, Sunday, whatever, for the majority of clubs, not in Europe, right?
Yeah, true.
So if you take
Um,
Newcastle, who this year have obviously had great success winning the Carabao Cup and won a trophy, and it's huge for the football club. And I think Newcastle's one you and I have held up several times over and said atmosphere is great. Now you and I are also going there as big six opponents going there, and Newcastle are aiming to breach that. I had a lot of feedback from Newcastle fans at the FA Cup game. So the FA Cup's important to Newcastle. Remember, this is before they've won the trophy. The FA Cup game against Brighton, a really good side, and we're like, the atmosphere is terrible. It's so people feeding back to me saying St James's is amazing when it's a big game, but if it's not a big game, once you've got you kind of, it's almost like the Liverpool impact. You sing "You Never Walk Alone," then you don't hear nothing for 90 minutes. Is how it feels quite a lot. The Newcastle impact's the same. You get all these brilliant tifos and visuals and banners before the game, but unless it's a big opponent, it's not that great there either.
do you think you've been going football a lot longer than me? Do you has that always been the
Thanks.
case
I've
with?
suffered a lot longer than you as well. Cheers.
But like, was that the case when you were younger in terms of atmosphere typically always being better against the kind of air quotes bigger teams, or like I'm trying to think back in the day who were a couple of mid-table teams, if they were playing at home, what would the atmosphere have been like then?
Example, go on. Are you talking about Tottenham going somewhere?
Yeah, just like so. There, the kind of hypothesis we've said is like teams like Newcastle, if they're playing against the Big Six, they'll be up for it. But then when they played Brighton, it wasn't quite the same. 10 years ago, do you think that was the same, or do
Yeah,
you think?
probably.
Yeah,
I'll give a really interesting example. And I've used this one before. Some of you have heard of it, some of you won't. But I went to Villa Park's a really good away day. I went to Villa Park the year Emery took over and they were 16th in the league and they pipped us to a Conference League place. And I think it was game week 36 that we went there in Villa Park. And the atmosphere was probably the best I'd experienced that year. Probably it was a bouncing atmosphere. They were on an incredible run of winning games, but it also got themselves to a position where qualifying for Europe was something they could not have expected at all. So to achieve it, even though it was just a Conference League play, it was a big deal to them, right? You could feel it outside the ground, inside the ground, big game. My club was vulnerable. They deserved to win. They deserved to qualify for Europe. That atmosphere was bouncing. That was to get in the Conference League. I then went back there 10 months later with the two clubs, fourth and fifth, and this is in March, and in competition for a Champions League place. So it's now even bigger. The atmosphere was nowhere near the same.
it's all expectation driven, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. So now I expect. I've seen us do Tottenham before to qualify for Europe. I've had a taste of Europe. And even though I'm sure Villa fans were desperate to get in the Champions League, and ultimately, again, they did it and deserved it. But the atmosphere that day was nowhere near the same. But I also don't know, and it's saying else to come on to. Villa tactically played those two games very differently, and that's the point I want to get onto
Yeah.
as well. In fact, let's jump that.
Just
Let's do tactics now.
can I
Go on,
just
you were going to say
before we
one
get
more.
onto that?
Yeah.
Just yeah, one thing that sparked in my mind there, what you said, like, because yeah, I think I definitely fall into the trap of being insulated about the big six and thinking about my own bubble. I do a lot of ground hopping, right? Like, I love going watching lower league games, trying to tick off all the 92 stadiums. And it was non-league day the other day. I was looking at going to Boreham Wood again. I think they were playing Dorking or something, and I couldn't go, but the tickets for that was 22 quid. And like, I get it's important for them because of like their gate receipts and stuff. But like, I think down the pyramid, like I've been to a lot of League Two, League One games, mate, they're not cheap. And like, I get it, the revenue is more important to them, but still, like, that's a lot of money.
I give a shout out on a couple of things. So I don't know what the cost was, but we know that was 38,000 at the Women's North East Derby between Newcastle and Sunderland at the weekend. I know there was 7,000 at a Women's Bournemouth game at the weekend. I presume these costs were cheaper than that. Give a couple of men's examples. I think it was 23,000 at Bradford at the weekend in League Two, £5 a ticket.
Wow, that's
And in the
great.
National League North, they broke the record for the highest attendance. This is at tier six. I don't think you'd get this much around the world between Scunthorpe and Chester, over 8,000.
Wow. Ha! That's unreal.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
I
mental.
mean, so it's interesting that we talk about the culture of fan involvement in terms of being much better in terms of atmosphere. But also, I think you and I are a bit blinded by the level we're at because there is no way you're getting that Scunthorpe Chester thing in tier six. I don't think. Correct me if I'm wrong in Italy, Spain, France,
Yeah,
anything
no,
like that. And I know like
it's
Bordeaux are in like the fourth tier in France at the moment, so that would be like a rare exception.
no, it's a really good point. Like, I'm not so informed on the tiers across the continent, but in England, our football pyramid is outstanding in terms of the support across, yeah, the whole 92 and more. So, yeah, I don't, I've not been to enough to know about atmosphere, but to be honest, I've always enjoyed the atmosphere when I've gone to non-league games and like down League Two, League One. But like I've been to random games at Bromley, Crawley, Swindon, and it's like the atmosphere's been naff when there's nothing at stake.
You ever been to Ellen Road?
Yes. Oh, sorry, Ellen Road. No, I misheard you. No, I've
Leeds.
not been. No.
So Leeds is a little bit kind of similar to Newcastle and it kind of like one city team kind of mantra, right? Really good support Leeds historically. We're a bigger football club than most people realise. I went there their last Premier League game when they got relegated. My team, they were terrible at the time, competing with Villa for that Conference League place. Went there and won 4-1. And the atmosphere was shy. Leeds fans had apathy with a terrible season of losing regularly. Um, they didn't kind of have the same feelings what they'd had with Bielsa in the past and stuff. I spoke to many Leeds fans who said their experience in terms of the atmosphere was much better when they were in the Championship than when they were in the Premier League.
Throughout the season or just that one-off game?
And obviously, at that level, you're winning more games. But I think even just finding they were away from the lights of the Premier League and all that goes on with it, and it was just more about the atmosphere when they were going to somebody's other place in the Championship, just felt a lot better.
I see that a lot with
It's like we all get
supporters.
marginalised a bit in the Premier League. I don't know. And you and I support clubs that have only been in that league, so we can't really empathise. But I know lots of Leeds fans have said that about, yeah, their experience of atmospheres was much better in the Championship than the Premier League, and I can believe that.
I've seen that a lot from supporters of clubs that are typically one of the best in the Championship, but then one of the worst in the Premier League, where like a lot of them prefer the Championship from the competition. I think because they have a chance, right? Whereas in the Premier League, they more often get slapped. And but also atmospheres, like you said, just going up and down the country. I think there's more mileage to do and stuff. There's a variety of away days and stuff. And yeah, I've seen so many supporters of clubs in that kind of area of the Premier League and Championship that prefer the Championship from the match going experience, to be honest.
Come back to my point on Villa. I was going to mention tactics
Tactics,
as a
yeah.
reason genuinely that's affecting atmospheres. So I use that example, those two Villa Tottenham games again. In that game where we were competing for seventh, Villa came out the traps fast and went for us. Scored after a few minutes. Don't get me wrong, that's helpful. But Villa played in a swashbuckling style that was going to go and attack and hurt the opposition all throughout. Okay. So playing front foot offensive football. When the two teams met in that game in March, Villa decided to retreat and let Tottenham have the ball. That has an impact on atmospheres. I really believe that. And I think our game now in this country is way more tactical. I think we can all agree on this than it was 5, 10, 20. You can go back as long as you want. The game now is so thorough tactically. And I think, therefore, it's more strategic. And therefore, in a weird way, you're seeing less crap, less errors, less carnage. Some of the favourite football matches we've watched historically have not been 1-0 victories. They've been 3-2s, 4-3s. And you still get these games, and actually goals in the Premier League are on the rise, right? But strategically, there is a lot more going into this tactically. And I think a lot of people don't like it, and that's
Yeah,
okay.
I think it makes sense if you think about the things that get you up off your seat in a game. It's not, oh my god, look at the distances between those centre backs. It's like a crunching tackle or a moment of imperfection, right? And I think the way the game has evolved, even from my youth to me being an adult now, it's become more structured. And I think as a result, you lose that those moments of imperfection. And like take wingers as an example. Like growing up, oh my god, watching wingers was a joy. Like the trickery, the unpredictability. Whereas now, how much do we talk about people like Grealish? Like they get the ball, recycle, and it's like that. It's simple things that get you off out of your seat, and a
Great
lot
ball
of
carriers. Ryan Giggs would be one. You could be at Old Trafford, Ryan Giggs would get the ball and you could feel it. Like going
yeah,
back, I'm going back 20 odd years here more.
but yeah, I think it makes sense. The way football has evolved, it's a lot more structured. It's a lot more optimal and chess orientated. It's about finding the edge, and as a result, like it's probably the most optimal way to win a game, but I don't think it's the most entertaining. No way.
Do you think tactics have an impact?
Yeah, 100%. I think
Yeah,
everything I just said is driven by tactics, in my opinion. What about you?
I agree with that. I think there's a lot of angst as well. I get it every week. Kick it long. I think we've evolved from this, but actually, it's what a lot of people still want to see is it just punted towards the other goal, and a lot of it's fear, get it away from our own goal and stuff like that. I know it's like that everywhere. It really is. So I think tactics is having an impact on atmospheres, way more strategic. Almost, you're almost trained to know what to expect to see now in terms of we'll all have different styles, but there will be things you watch with Arsenal. You know, the ball's going to Saka, and you probably know what's happening next. And it might be, well, if he's kind of pushed towards the halfway line, he's going backwards. He's not now going to go, I'm going to turn and face you up. On the edge of the area, he might do that. On the halfway line, he's not doing it. You already
Yeah.
know that. I see that with my wingers as well. Think you're going backwards here. It's almost trained to something rather than get it to I don't know, players who might have been a little bit more erratic, say like your Theo Walcotts and Aaron Lennon, to use two examples from our two clubs, right? Probably a bit more direct in terms of what they were doing, make more errors than someone like a Saka, who's obviously an incredible player. But pay me, we don't have as much risk in our game anymore. We don't have Ozils, Van der Vaarts. We don't have these tens, don't really exist at many clubs anymore. So flares come out the game quite a lot. I think modern tactics is having an impact on
You've used
atmospheres.
you've used the word there. It's risk. I think football has become a lot more risk averse. And I'm sure we'll talk about it on Thursday's Clayton and James. But like Tuchel's pressers, he was talking about wanting to take more risk and stuff. And I think that risk generates adversity and unpredictability, right? And I think a lot of football now, especially at the top level, it's typically a very good team against a low block, and it's like at that point you just have to take risks. Like structure isn't going to break that down. So yeah, I
Oh
agree. I
yeah,
think
we
tactics is a
will.
huge part.
We'll talk about that on Thursday, no doubt, mate. I've been thrilled watching England this last week. I don't have the man crush that you currently do at the moment. Modern
Up the
arenas,
Tuchel.
up the two, sure. Modern arenas are having
Okay.
an impact. I think these modern
Keyword
stadiums.
there, arena. You said arena there. I think that's quite
mm,
telling.
well,
I know that
unfortunately,
was.
that's what they are, right? If you look at the plans for Old Trafford, they include a lot of the new Old Trafford. We can hold this many concerts that it's a thing now, right? We know about Tottenham. It's like, yeah, we're 14th in the league, but how many nights of Beyonce have you got next year, right? So we've got our own little wins in our own little dusty cabinet, right? Yeah, and that's what they are. They're arenas now because they don't hold the same character in stadiums in the way they used to. I'm really intrigued by the Everton example. Everton have been having test events very recently. I know our correspondent Sean went for the first time at the weekend. And if you Goodison is the kind of the epitome of I think Premier League ground in terms of
I love Goodison.
character. It's a shithole, isn't it? But it's their
No,
shithole, and
I
I
love
don't
it.
even mean that disparagingly about Everton. And it is one of them places, we've said it so many times. If you end up at Goodison and the crowd is up for it, there don't matter if you're a lot better, you can end up under it and getting beaten. You've seen very good Arsenal have some very difficult games there. I've seen Tottenham have many bad days at Goodison Park, right? That place holds character. Now, what's interesting about Everton's new stadium is I think they're about, as a football club, about to come out of a period of almost depression, actually,
Yep.
from a financial viewpoint. They've got new owners, previous managers come back. There's a good positive vibe. They've had a load of games kind of without losing, they got themselves out of trouble. And now I think Everton as a football club can begin to think forward, and that stadium is an epitome of it. If you see inside the new Goodison Park, it is incredibly steep
I've seen
behind
a photo of it. Yeah.
behind particularly the main home end, a little bit like Tottenham's. And it will be interesting to see if it holds the atmosphere in the same way.
It won't.
I think it will do for probably a couple of months, and that will be the end of it.
Yeah,
Unfortunately,
and
I was
this
going
is
to
a
use the
tricky
example of
one.
Leeds again. Like Leeds feel such pride in their atmosphere at Ellen Road. You build a new kind of modern, shiny arena, your atmosphere isn't going to be the same. I don't care if you're putting exactly the same people in the ground. It's not going to
But
be the
then
same.
what's more important, keeping the atmosphere you're proud of or evolving as a football club to have longevity to compete with where the game is heading?
Correct. So that's full circle to should all we care about is winning? Because ultimately, for me, and I know like my dad would disagree with this comment, for example, and he had greater time obviously at the old White Hart Lane than I did. You drop me back in there tomorrow, I'm happy. I got nothing against the new stadium. Love it. It's one of the best built in the world. It is an incredible football stadium. But drop me back in that old White Hart Lane where it felt like you were over the top of the pitch more. And I kind of feel like that at the new stadium. Done a good job, but it's just not the same. That 62,000 now cannot make the noise that the 36,000 made at the old stadium. That logically should be incorrect with an extra 26,000 in the ground, but it's not. They will never ever be able to replicate the atmosphere that that old stadium had. And I'm sure you'll hear Arsenal fans tell similar tales about Highbury, and Everton fans are going to sit here in
West
5 years and say similar about Goodison, West Ham, and Upton Park. All of those would be examples. But
Yeah,
again,
see,
I don't know if it's also us getting older. Is it?
I don't know. I don't agree that logically by having 20,000 extra people, the atmosphere should be better because for every one extra person in there, you're going to get two that want to go to watch football just to watch football and experience it and not get involved. And this is where, like, those places like Upton Park, the old White Hart Lane, Highbury on its day, they're intimate, right? When you're intimate, you have more of a buzz, you feel more of it compared to like how much do you talk about being in a different postcode at West Ham and stuff. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's definitely a conversation for another day. Like you said, like does it come back to the conversation around winning and success and stuff? But I think if you're at that old White Hart Lane, you can kiss away a lot of what you and I have spoken about on Patreon of what you want to see with Tottenham in terms of
Yeah, the club had to move, not
longevity.
criticising the club for
Yeah,
it had to build the new stadium in the same way your club had to do the same with the Emirates. It's not a
yeah,
criticism on the clubs of building the stadiums. It's just not the same. There will be people, say on the Gladys Street and at Goodison, who have stood and sat next to the same people for I don't know how many years, and they're probably about to get separated.
yeah. And this is
Now,
the
if you take that
sorry.
back further in time, before obviously the tragedy at Hillsborough and stadiums had to become all seater. Obviously, back in the day, you could have a group of 100 that you knew were going to go and just stand in the same place, say on the North Bank at Highbury or on the shelf at White Hart Lane or something like that, and just go and stand where you wanted. And those people would create what they wanted to create together. So to
Yeah,
relate
and
that back to the Tottenham example of, oh, there's a singing section, one here and one there, and you've got other fans in between. You're not doing it right. If it had been terracing, and imagine that stand at Tottenham now, if it could be like the yellow wall at Dortmund, where people just stood in the groups where they wanted to, that I am telling you would improve the atmosphere.
yeah, I
That's not to say
agree.
we
And
should take seats away, by the way. I don't want that.
no, I do agree. And like the factor that you've put there is correct. Like the modern arenas are definitely a factor. I agree, and in my opinion, behind the atmosphere declining, I just think it's probably a wider conversation on like why they are happening and unfortunately, this is the way the game's headed, right? It's all about monetizing in different areas outside of football to generate revenue to make your team the most competitive at the highest level. But a knock on impact of that is, unfortunately, yeah, atmospheres, I think, die off as a result. I don't personally think that having more people creates a better atmosphere. In fact, I feel very strongly the complete opposite. I think the smaller the ground, the better the atmosphere has potential to be.
I mean, to give a defense, I went to Coventry in the League Cup in September, and it was nowhere near full. But I tell you what, that group on the side did not make some noise. Sort of
Okay.
1,000, 2,000, very loud. As good as anything I've heard in the Premier League this year, and I've been to most away games. They were good. And that was in a modern arena. But I wonder if you then put, if Coventry come up next year and then stayed up for a few years, does it sustain? Forest, when Forest first went to Forest in August when it just come up 20 odd years, not in the league. Phenomenal atmosphere. Went back there 2 months later in the League Cup, and I know it's the League Cup, pin drops. It's not the same. And Forest won the second time in the League Cup game, by the way.
Yeah, that then I know we're going in different tangents here, but I think that then comes to expectation. I think if Coventry were to come up and, like you said, it's the first time they're up in the league, like that whole first season, I'd put money on that probably being the best in the Premier League. And then second, let's just say they come up, they finish, I don't know, 12th, and the next season their objective is, can we finish top half? I think the atmosphere, if you could quantify it, it would drop from like a 9 to a 6. And I think that's where I look across the continent with envy. I think they're just there to support and make noise regardless of what is going on the pitch and on the league table.
I want to come back to fan culture abroad with my last point, but there's another one I want to cover off first.
What number are we on now?
And we go to
Out of the
nine
10?
now.
Okay.
VAR.
Ha, go on, you take this one away. I know you got.
I'd rather not. But do we think it's having a subconscious impact? We do not celebrate goals the way we used to.
Yeah, you
We
said that
don't.
about yourself. I still do. I'm a fucking idiot. In that moment,
I
I
can't
don't
help
think
it.
of VAR. Still, it's like I'm so present, I forget about VAR. But I know you said yourself, like a goal will go in, and you kind of hesitate, think, "Oh, was he offside? Is that going to get changed?" I'm not quite there yet. I don't. I hope I stay there, but yeah, I know. How do you feel about it? Because you've spoken a lot about kind of not celebrating and stuff and waiting.
There's that, the celebration element, but then there's also things, and listen, the atmosphere at Wembley obviously wasn't great last night, despite the volume of people that were there. Understandable with the game that they're watching. But there was a penalty check that went on for a really long time on Jared Bowen in the first half, right?
Yeah,
2.5 minutes or so. Right decision, fine, no penalty. But that don't help. You got 2.5 minutes of people just sitting there. Now, I agree with you. Like culturally, I think in Germany, while that VAR check's going on, I think people are just bouncing still and they carry on. Culturally, we don't do that. We sing our songs or we react to what is going on the pitch.
why
If
do you think
nothing's
that
going on the
is?
pitch, we're in trouble. It's just
I
culturally how
don't.
we are.
But like, what? I know we're jumping. I'm just so curious on why that is.
Just think it's culture that's gone on for a long time, Kate. So I can't really explain it to you. It's always been, if you go back into, not a lot of people know this, right? But say I'd mentioned about Liverpool fans joking about singing "You Never Walk Alone," right? Well, before Hillsborough, etc., the majority of clubs in this country sang that song.
Is it?
Yeah, you'd have heard it at Highbury. You find old video, you hear it a while, Lane. You hear it in many places where it gets sung, right? And then it was kind of claimed by Liverpool, and everyone went, "Yeah, fair enough." But those are the sort of songs that it's always been in Europe. And again, we don't understand the language, but a lot of it just feels like noise sometimes, and it's just incessant. You can hear just constant beating, 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 and then you'll hear like choreographed kind of singing and stuff. It's almost like it feels sometimes that they know in like minute 15 you're singing that. It feels like it
Yeah.
could be like that. I'm not saying it is. But in ours, it's like we almost need the team to do something for us sometimes. Now, there are certain games, I've mentioned the Southampton home example. If we're playing Arsenal at home on Sunday, crowds up for it from the start. It's very different. But quite often in just an average fixture, the crowds here, and I think it's irrespective of who you support, quite often need the team to lift them Rather than in Europe, often the crowd is just constantly, incessantly lifting the team. VAR breaks, never mind the cancellation of goals. VAR breaks do not help the atmosphere here.
Yeah,
Can
it's
you imagine what it was like at that Bournemouth Wolves game in the cup with a 7 minute break?
fucking hell. That must have been awful. Yeah,
But it's just
I
killed the
reckon.
vibe. Like, for all knows, and I know Bournemouth's a small stadium, so it's a bad example, but for all we know, the atmosphere in the ground was really good before that. And then maybe that whole 7 minutes just kills it for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I didn't think of VAR when we knew the topic was going to be atmospheres, and in hindsight, I'm like, how did I not think of it? It's such an obvious factor. Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to add on that, to be honest. Yeah, I think it definitely is a big
No,
factor.
and the less said about VAR, the better. So we'll leave it, and we'll get on to my final point, which is I think you could label this a number of different ways. So you could label it social media, but I will label it as a celebration police.
Ha, yes. Don't I know about them being an Arsenal fan?
So it doesn't matter who you support, mate. So go away in Europe, but it doesn't even have to go Europe. Just go to a Bundesliga game, Serie A game, whatever, and you'll be looking at it sometimes, and a team might be at home and they're getting twatted 3-0 by Bayern Munich in Germany, and the home crowd is still bouncing away and singing. It's just incessant. It just doesn't stop. It's brilliant. Now, imagine that now, where Liverpool are pissing all over Villa, for example, at Villa Park, and the whole end is bouncing. What's the
Can't
cultural reaction to that here?
people calling Tim Pot like and this and that and yeah. This is what I liked about the
So there's
Ashburton
something
Army,
in our
man. They
psyche about the
yeah,
social reaction externally of what we do.
but that's what I
Oh,
really
that's
liked
not
about
normal.
the Ashburton Army when we were 1-0 down. They were just bouncing. That's what I liked about them. It was culturally different. But you're right. I think the celebration police and yeah, I don't know. It's a very British thing, isn't it? It's just like we're quite as a culture quite like pessimistic, glass half empty sort of thing. And I don't know,
Except
like
when
people would
England
just
play. It's coming home, it's coming home.
yeah, but like, I'd say people typically would describe Brits as quite negative, right? And I
I think
think
that's
there's
fair.
yeah, I think that's probably it, to be honest. Like yeah, I don't know. It is a shame, but I don't know why we are that way.
Celebration police are the absolute worst. Let people celebrate whatever they want, however they want. There are too few things in life to enjoy and be happy about. So if you can find something, be happy about it and celebrate it. But I think there is a cultural to that. So, give an example. Sorry, I'm going to use Fulham again because I was there the other week. But Fulham got a corner, and at Craven Cottage, it probably is. It's a great little setting of a stadium, but in terms of atmosphere, it is pony. And don't get me wrong, it's not the biggest game in the world. Just Fulham Tottenham on a Sunday. It was a bigger game for Fulham than it was for Tottenham. Anyway, they win a corner and the happy clapping starts going off, like rattle shaking. And it's like, what the fucking hell is that? And that's like the only noise you get out of them. So even if you do something, it's like you're getting told, oh, that was a bit tin pot, that, isn't it? And that's
Yeah,
become like a buzzword, doesn't it? Tin pot. We just label everything
it's
as
one of my favorite
tin
words.
pot.
Yeah,
Do you remember the one? And I'm sure it was regrettable, right? But it was normal. The old one that gets mentioned a lot is the Liverpool one when Klopp had first taken over and they drew a game at home to West Brom, and
yeah,
all the players linked on walked over to the cop, right? Now in Dortmund, it's culturally would be done after every game, no matter what, right? So Klopp's probably thought, I'm going to introduce this over to Liverpool. There are many similarities between those two football clubs. They also sing "You'll Never Walk Alone" at Dortmund. The yellow wall, the cop, the kind of the playing style. There's a lot there in terms of you can compare with the two clubs. He's tried to bring that over. Now you should have at least picked a game that you won. Unfortunately, you've drawn it home to West Brom and the players walking up in front of the crowd doing like arm lifts and stuff, no, it's not going to take off, right? But even probably
yes,
Liverpool fans were thinking, what the fuck is this? Probably.
yeah,
And
and
it's been used to
I
death to beat them with, like, ever since.
100%. But like me personally, I never had an issue with it, to be honest. Like, but again, I don't know the way I'm wired. Like, I don't think I'm. typically British. And I think a lot of that is my family heritage. Like, I've got a lot of influence from outside of Britain in the way I'm wired and stuff. But like, I don't know. Yeah, I didn't see an issue with that, and I think the bond Klopp and his supporters, sorry, Klopp and the supporters of Liverpool built is probably one of the best that you can aspire to get to. And I think people, I don't know, we love to have opinions about things, but fundamentally, like they had the last laugh, didn't they? They did everything there is to
Oh
do
yeah, yeah,
in that.
but that didn't continue
What in the sense of doing that
because
like
the
every
negative
game or
reaction to it, and that may have even included from many Liverpool fans, was like, "What are you doing? Like, we don't do
yeah,
that here." So then it's relatable to you. So you tried. So Klopp, I think, tried to bring something over from the fan culture in Germany, bring it here, and it just didn't work.
yeah, and that's
Kind of more my
fine.
point.
Yeah, not everything is going to take off, but yeah, culture. Like to be honest, if Arsenal, the context is everything, right? I think was that their first home game under him.
I don't think first, but one of the
Okay,
first.
right. Like so, yeah, that was probably him trying to establish a relationship and stuff. But like if we just dropped points at home to West Brom and Arteta and Arsenal came over and did that, I'd be like, fuck off. But
Exactly.
but
Exactly.
at the start of the journey, like I think Arteta's first home game was against Chelsea, and I think we lost 2-1. And I was there. If he came and did that, I'd feel pride, to be honest, in that because I watched a performance that day where I felt quite enthused. So I think the context of when that happens is everything. But culturally, like I wish I was in a culture where that was acceptable. That's the sort of things I want. I want that bond and relationship with my team and manager.
So do
But
we think I'll use Frankfurt as an example because Tottenham are playing them next in Europe, and I've been watching a few videos of Frankfurt ultras and fans and stuff recently, and they are just constant all through the games. Brilliant. Do you think that in Germany people are taking the piss out of Frankfurt? So Frankfurt lost 4-1 home to Leverkusen a couple of weeks ago. Do we think that people in Germany are taking the piss out of Frankfurt fans, keep singing at 4-1 down to Leverkusen?
not at all. If anything, they're raising a glass to cheer them on.
But it would happen here.
Yep.
Sometimes you will occasionally hear, so like and it's more, it's again like it's lyrical singing, like, I'm Tottenham until I die, or something. Like you're 4-0 down somewhere and you're showing a bit of defiance, and you'll hear it on the commentary. It's like, oh, they're still singing at 4-0 down. Well done. It's nothing like it is culturally in some of these other places on the continent. But and I think there's that's okay. Like right at the end, you show a bit of defiance. I even saw that Man City fans get criticised for the atmosphere a lot. Same when we went there and beat them 4-0, it was 3-0 towards the end, and they knew they'd lost, and they had kind of like a moment of defiance and support of Guardiola in the ground. But that's it. That's like a rare thing. You wouldn't. They kept losing. I don't think it kept happening. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was like a one-off.
Yeah. I think
So
that's the thing with those defeats. It's almost like if you're losing 2-1 and it's close, you don't hear that kind of echoing support. But it's almost like if you're battered, there's that
yeah,
level of apathy where you're just going to get, you're just going to. I remember when we lost away at Man City, when Xhaka got sent off, was it 5-0 maybe?
it
And you could
was.
just
Yeah,
hear the away end. But like if it was 2-1, you wouldn't hear the away end to that same level. So there's something in that where
yeah.
almost like
It's
if
in
you're
the psyche
completely knocked
again.
out.
It's cultural. Yeah. And I think it's almost like a defiance thing. Like it's so far gone now, like whatever, last hurrah or something like that. So I think celebration police does massively impact um how people react socially now, and also in stadiums somewhat as well.
Do you think, on the topic of social media, do you think people are concerned about, like, nowadays everyone feels like they've got their phone out recording you? Do you think some people are a bit self-conscious on, like, oh, if I get caught on camera and I go viral, or not so much?
Yeah, I do think that's a possibility. I think one of the things that probably should be acknowledged here in terms of atmospheres as well is I've heard some terrible songs sung by Tottenham fans historically, and you don't really hear it now. And that's an impact as well. I think people felt that they could say what they wanted. And we're not saying this is good, but in terms of noise and atmosphere, yeah, there were more, let's say, edgy songs.
Yeah.
We don't get many edgy songs now. And I'm not just holding Tottenham up as an example, because I think we could use probably any team here, by the way. It's just from my own personal experiences. Edgy songs aren't really there now. No one wants to. I'm not even saying we should. It's changed, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know if them songs in Germany and Italy, etc., are edgy or not, Clates. I have an idea. That's true. I don't know. Maybe they are. Maybe some of it's racist and stuff. I've no idea, mate. I suspect it's not, by the way. Um, Certainly in Germany. So yeah, I think the edge has been lost a little bit. Another point I did want to make, I should have said this about modern arenas, I think particularly, and I can use the example of England last night, and I understand it completely, particularly there because it is an absolute pig. But 5 minutes to go, that ground is empty. Now, there's been
Yeah,
80,000 in the ground now. 5 minutes to go, that ground is empty. Now, we've all experienced that, where it's the Emirates is empty in 5 minutes before the game, White Hart Lane the same, all these modern arenas. How often would you look at Goodison unless they're getting battered and go, oh, the Gladys Street's emptying with 5 minutes to go? Like it doesn't, does it? But it might at the new place.
yeah,
Be
and
interesting.
that is an interesting one. I don't remember watching games across Europe, like in La Liga, Liga, Bundesliga, and noticing that in the
I
grounds, to
have a
be honest.
guy who sits in front of me. He's probably in between my age and my dad's. Is probably like, I don't know, late 50s or 60s or something. He leaves with over 10 minutes to go every single game. Now, the ticket there ain't cheap. And I just think, what are you doing? And last year it was like a running joke because every other game we got a winner like in injury time and stuff. So you missed all. Last year, I think you see Tottenham win about 4 games because we won about eight in injury time.
Yeah,
Like, what have you turned up for every week? So
yeah.
there's
There's a
that.
guy in.
And a lot of that
There's a.
is, beat the traffic, beat the crowd, and but that just never would have happened back in the day in some of the older places.
Do you not think so? I was young, so I don't remember, but I've got this feeling that that's always been a thing in England, like
Not
leaving
to
at a
the
certain
extent
time.
of what it is now.
No,
I don't think. No, no, no. I don't know if it's the volume of people. So, I mean, one of the things to say, with like the Emirates, White Hart Lane, the new Everton, etc., you've got more people. There's more people to get away. So, I understand if you're like a parent or something, you're more conscious of your child and getting away and stuff like that. I remember my dad dragging me out the ground. We were losing 2-0 to Chelsea in 92-93 season, and I missed Tottenham scoring. You'd never guess who scored for Tottenham, by the way. You can. It was his first ever goal for the club, and I missed it.
you said 92, 93. There's no way I'm guessing that.
You are, because he played for you. Anyway, so
Oh, big so.
yeah, yeah, arsehole. So not your arsehole, not my arsehole, I should probably add. I hated my dad for that. He
Yeah,
was sick of seeing the Chelsea fans singing and literally probably took me out with like a minute to go. Literally, I was like, I hated him for it. I said, Dad, I missed a goal. It was the first goal I'd ever missed. I hated him for it. But that was so rare that we ever did that. I mean, I can count on two hands the amount of times I've left early. And
yeah,
we've
me
often
too.
been like 5-0 down or 6-1 down or so, we're absolutely getting battered, the game's done. Um, but yeah, for so many people, like that guy in front of me, he's leaving like the 80-minute mark every game. It's
Oh,
literally the part of the game that's most likely to have a goal, mate.
yeah,
It staggers me, but he's not the only one.
no, there's a guy in front of me at Arsenal that does that as well. And I've always just thought, like, if someone lives far, then do you know what? Maybe it's that, but maybe that's a byproduct of moving to bigger ground. You attract people from outside of the kind of catchment area that have lots like long commutes or
But I'm
something.
saying this guy, it's not like he's a tourist. And it's like, oh, I see tourists doing it every week. This guy's got a scene ticket. He's there every game. He
Yeah,
does it
well,
every game.
maybe he lives outside of London or something. Like you don't know, right?
No, I don't. But 80 minutes.
Yeah,
Clearly, if you do it every week, you're going to miss something. The chances are you're going to miss the best moment of the season somewhere in
very
there
true.
across all the home games. Chances are you're going to miss a last minute winning goal at some point because you do it every game. And like I said, we had loads last year. It was a running joke. Leave. We need to score now.
Yeah,
Oh, piss off. Yeah, he
it's
kept
interesting
pissing
that
off.
you. Yeah, it's interesting you don't think that's always been a thing. Like I said, yeah, I can't remember, but yeah, it definitely is a thing though. Everywhere I go, I see that. But yeah, it's not great. But I'm always like, oh, I don't really know what's going on in their lives.
Clayton, good chat. So
Yeah,
my
enjoyed that.
10 reasons for recap that impacting atmospheres are cost, tourism, families, schedules and routines, us, COVID, tactics, modern arenas, VAR, and the celebration police slash social media. If you've got any you think me and Clayton have missed, let us know. You never know. We might even drop it into the conversation on Thursday's podcast. Tomorrow, Tottenham, great. Yeah, Ricky Saunders, can't wait. Clash of Correspondents tomorrow is Chelsea versus Tottenham with Gary Mantle and Ricky Saunders. Clayton will be back with me for the Clayton and James show, which this week is on Thursday. Smash a like, hit the sub button if you're on the audio. A 5-star review goes a really, really long way. Cue music, please, man child.